A US Bank Solutions Supervisor dropped a ton of secrets about underwriting policies, approvals, and credit limits. They talked about how US Bank uses a hidden customer relationship score to make decisions and offers, how one set of cards you probably never heard of gets better customer service than you, and the minimum credit score you need for automatic credit limit increases. Let's start with a couple of personal questions, and let me tell you, one of their answers really made me laugh. So they asked, do you have any US Bank cards? And they said, I actually do hold the Cash Plus Visa Signature card. And then they asked, any crazy stories that stand out of dealing with people as a customer service rep? And they said, too many stories to count. One comes to mind where this lady was unaware she was being charged late payment fees and interest. She was under the impression she only had to pay the minimum to avoid interest. I was feeling extra kind that day, so I waived $500+ in fees and interest. She said, that's kind of you, but I really need to think over whether or not I'll pursue business with US Bank or go elsewhere. And so I charged all the fees back without her knowledge for being an unappreciative. Yeah, that made me laugh. Moving on to approvals and credit limits, I really didn't expect to learn so many exact details about approval requirements. The first question is, how do existing banking relationships affect card applications and credit limits? What's the minimum criteria for Cash Plus card too? They said, I wouldn't recommend a US Bank card if you don't have an existing account with them. I've seen 820 FICO scores approved with a starting limit of $500 solely because they didn't have any existing relationships with us. And US Bank previously had a downsell, what we would approve you for if you didn't qualify for the signature product, and that was the Cash Plus Visa Platinum card, but that has since been discontinued. I don't know the exact qualifications, but I would recommend at least a 600 FICO score. I've seen a 580 be approved, but with extensive credit history and very few inquiries. US Bank won't touch you if you have several. You will need that 700 FICO for a promotional APR for 6 months or so, and in most cases, limit increases. Sadly, the system is used to automatically declining a credit limit increase if you're under a 700 FICO. And yes, representatives readily have access to your FICO score, or if you've submitted a request within a 6-month duration. Moving on, are online pre-approvals reliable? And they said, I definitely wouldn't rely on the information provided in the pre-qualification tool. I wouldn't use that tool as a means to indicate whether you'll be approved. It's just not a good tool to use whatsoever. Next, I was one of those to get approved with a high FICO and initial starting limit of $500. Close the account immediately. Ain't nobody got time for that. And here's their response. You're always more than welcome to speak with underwriting, and a rep will manually review a higher credit limit option upon your request. Next, how does a $300 parked savings account affect approvals and limits? And they said, I honestly believe that's why my Cash Plus came back with a $5,500 limit instead of a starting limit of $500 due to having that $300 parked in a savings account before I applied. I would say having it there longer than I did, 2 weeks, would be more helpful as well. Next, what profile is recommended for unsecuring a card? Here's where they said, I would recommend having the secured card open for at least a year with an on-time payment history before requesting an unsecured product. If you do end up requesting an unsecured product, I would recommend a minimum of 680 FICO score. Next, what's needed for the Altitude Reserve approval? I'm not sure of the exact requirements, but I would recommend you be at least over a 720 score on your TransUnion report, basing this solely on the fact that I've yet to see someone with this product under a 720 score. US Bank also doesn't take kindly to multiple inquiries in a short period of time. Moving on, how does US Bank decide on credit card approvals and limits? Here's what they said, most decisions for approvals are automated. If you get a 7 to 10 day notice, I recommend calling underwriting and having a representative manually review it. I've seen higher starting limits with the Visa Platinum than I've seen with the Cash Plus card. So yes, APRs and starting limits do vary depending on the product you select. Again, if your main bank is US Bank, you'll more than likely be approved for a credit card through the bank as well. Next, what's the maximum credit line for US Bank cards? They answer by saying US Bank offers 2 types of credit card products, a no preset spending limit and a normal credit limit product. These no preset spending limits have revolve limits that act as credit limits, but US Bank is a little more lenient with letting you go over that limit than they would with a normal credit card. I believe for normal US Bank products, the cap is $50,000. That was the highest credit limit that I've seen. But with these no preset limits, the system would occasionally allow you to go over that limit depending on your payment history, income on file, etc. I've seen accounts go over by $20,000 if they're a no preset spending limit product. For Altitude cards, unfortunately, I handled very few of these. I did work the escalation line for these customers, but they were a rare account to come across. I believe the cap for those is $100,000, but it's also a no preset spending card, so the same rule before still applies. Next, when requesting a credit limit increase, should you aim high or low? And here's what they said, a couple of things I want to bring to your attention here. You'll never be approved for more than you actually request. Any request over $4,500 will automatically be reviewed. If the system US Bank uses recognizes you're under a 700, it will automatically need to be reviewed. If you're over a 700 but not approved for the requested amount, US Bank will most likely have a counter offer for you at the time of request. And that's going to be automatically generated by the system. Now, how long should you wait before applying for another card like the Altitude Reserve? And they said a 720 is the minimum I would recommend for a decent success rate approval. Yes, there are cases where people are approved with a high 600, but that's going to be with proof of high income and high credit lines, etc. A good rule of thumb I always recommend is at least a 6-month time frame for anything regarding US Bank. You know, getting approved for premium credit cards and business credit cards is like pulling teeth when you have a low FICO score under 700. But you can still get business funding if you have at least a 620 FICO score with a free Novo business checking account. Getting access to higher credit limits is especially important when you operate a small business and you're trying to run payroll for your employees and buy supplies and equipment for that next job. Novo offers business funding up to $75,000 for small businesses. And get this, there's no hard pull, there's no tax returns required, so you don't need to find years of tax returns in years past. There's no PG, so you're not personally responsible for repaying the debt, just your business is on the hook for that debt. And since it comes with a free business checking account, when you get approved for the funds, it goes directly into your Novo business checking account. And with that cash money, you can use however you want. So hit the link below to sign up with Novo and get up to $75,000 in no PG funding, plus a free business checking account. Now, let's talk about credit scoring and reporting. They said, is it true that US Bank reports the current balance on the last business day of the month? And they said US Bank reports the current balance owed every 30 days. Generally, updates occur between the 30th and the 5th of every month. Occasionally, in months such as February, reporting will happen on the 27th or 28th. And then they came with a follow-up question. They said, so US Bank reports the current balance from the 27th through the 5th each month. Should I change my payment due date accordingly? And how can I do that? And they answered by saying the current balance owed is always what's reported. Yes, it would make sense to adjust your due date to later in the month or at least pay the balance down before reporting. Due dates most definitely can be adjusted, but it takes one full billing cycle to kick into effect. Call the number located on the back of your card and they'll be able to get that changed for you. Any customer service rep can take care of that for you. Next, did US Bank switch from using mortgage scores to FICO 9 for credit decisions on new credit card accounts? And they said, my old training manager reached out. She said she spoke with the current solutions rep who stated they do, in fact, use the FICO 9 scoring model now. Next, do your business cards report to any of the business credit reporting agencies like Experian, Equifax Small Business, or Dun & Bradstreet? Here's what they said. We pull information from Dun & Bradstreet. We don't report any of the business accounts. You know, the thing is, US Bank is very well known for their 0% interest business credit cards that go up to 18 months. And I made a list of 10 different 0% interest business cards that never report to your personal credit with sign-up bonuses going up to $750 right now. I'll leave a link to that below. Now let's talk about banking policies. I learned US Bank does have an internal score, but they call it something different. And I learned exactly how long you cannot use their cards before they will close your account. So the question was asked, how to convert Flex Perks Visa travel rewards to Cash Plus. They said contacting card member service would be your best bet. When a representative accesses your account, they'll be able to tell you immediately if you're eligible for a product change. Considering you've already been approved for a Flex Perks travel visa signature, you're most likely eligible for a product conversion. And the next question is, for a Korean Air Secure card added as a joint account holder, does bankruptcy affect the unsecuring of the card? And they answer by saying US Bank will pull information for the primary account holder at the time you request an upgrade. Next, does US Bank waive annual fees for active duty military? And they said another department handles military accounts, but I'm 99% positive annual fees were not waived for active duty. Now, can my fiance be removed from our joint Altitude Reserve account to avoid the $75 additional card fee, or is there a way to waive this fee? And they said, I can tell you now that they won't remove her from the account. Your best bet is to close the account and reapply the next day. You should be approved without an issue. And as you know, there's a dedicated line for Altitude customers. After all, that's the high-end product US Bank offers, and you're very valuable to the company because you're expected to be a high spender. That being said, reps are a little more lenient with your account than they would be with others. I would call the Altitude Reserve line and explain your situation, but immediately ask to speak with Solutions. In some rare cases, they'll remove a co-applicant. In 99% of other cases, they won't remove an applicant or co-applicant from an account without a divorce decree specifying one of you is no longer liable for the account. Next, does settling an account for less than the balance owing result in being blacklisted by US Bank? US Bank has an internal credit recovery department you can mail or fax a request to dispute information on your report. But it's unlikely that that dispute is going to go through if the information is accurate. Collections and fraud departments can also change reporting history. Next, how does US Bank's customer relationship scoring work? And here's where they said there's definitely a customer relationship score. Underneath your FICO score in our system will be listed a behavior score for that account specifically. Unfortunately, frontline reps are not trained in how this is calculated. Now, how long can an account go without utilization before US Bank closes it? And they said generally a year to a year and a half. US Bank uses behavior scores based on the individual account, not your entire relationship with the bank. Utilizing only one card does not protect the other accounts from being closed. They'll most likely first automatically decrease the limit and afterward close the account completely. You can request to reopen the account within 60 days, but it still may result in a hard credit pull. Now, do all US Bank policies and rules apply to Elan financial cards? And they said, yes, Elan accounts are held to a different standard than US Bank products. In fact, we actually prioritize Elan cards in the call queue. And if you guys don't know, Elan is basically a separate company that US Bank operates. What they do is act as a third-party contractor for small community banks and credit unions and some regional banks as well. And what they do is handle the credit card programs for those banks. And that's going to include the underwriting process as well. Now, moving on, we got to talk about hard inquiries and how there's one thing you can do to avoid a hard credit pull when requesting a credit limit increase from US Bank. So then they asked, will requesting a hard credit limit increase with US Bank always involve a hard credit pull? And they said most of the procedures US Bank has in place are systematic. When going through a normal rep in customer service, they will never have eligible offers for a credit limit increase on their end. When submitting a request, they're required to tell you it may result in a hard inquiry to the credit bureaus, but they'll have no idea whether it's approved or not until they gather all information verbally and submit the request in the system. Generally, if the system recognizes you're above a 700 FICO, you haven't requested a line increase in the last 6 months, and your request isn't more than $4,500, you'll be approved at the time of the request, or the system will generate a counteroffer for the rep to give you. To summarize, if you're under a 700 FICO, expect a hard pull. If you're over, you'll most likely be approved unless your income is too low. Next, what is considered multiple inquiries in a short period of time, and how does it affect your credit card applications? And they said there is no exact number. Multiple inquiries are just taken into consideration. If you plan on applying for a US Bank card, I would just make sure it's the first card you apply for within a 6-month time frame. I've seen high scores decline simply because of too many requests for credit. And another person asked, how was I approved for a Cash Plus card with a decent limit despite having many recent inquiries in a new US Bank savings account? And they said it could also be the time you apply for the card. There was a period where we were approving almost everyone for that Cash Plus product. Your application may have been manually reviewed and excelled in other areas of your report and caused them to overlook your inquiries. I understand your account was only open for 2 weeks, but US Bank is very lenient when you already have an existing account with the bank. You know, large credit card companies like US Bank have so many internal rules about how they judge new applications. That's why it was so interesting when 3 credit card company employees from different large banks gave advice on approvals, limit increases, disputes, and late fees. They answered over 90 questions too, including 3 persuasive lines you can use with customer service to convince them to increase your credit limit, and the 8 criteria they look for when deciding to approve your application or not. You can find all the details in the next video, and thank you for watching.